important when it comes to this election. And let's start with this, because it was the data that we got today, and it was the data that the Prime Minister referred to in his speech. Inflation. We've had the cost of living crisis. That inflation rate, and we're talking about the rate at which prices are going up each year. The inflation rate went up to double-digit levels. It's now come down, look at it there, that roller coaster, down to 2.3% in April. So we got that number this morning at 7 o'clock, and it's partly that's what prompted the decision from the Prime Minister. But here's the two provisos with this. OK, first of all, it's definitely good news that it's down around that kind of Bank of England target rate. That pink area is where the Bank of England really wants it to be. But two issues here. First of all, I think when a lot of people think about inflation, they're not just thinking about that 2.3% number. They're thinking about what it means for them, what it means for their pockets. And here, I've taken basically the same data and just looked at it in terms of the level. So not the change each year, but the level. And you can see the level of prices went up and up and up. That's the cost of living crisis, where suddenly it was kind of going up slowly and then it went up really quickly. And that 2.3% that the Prime Minister talked about, that's the difference between there and there. But for a lot of people, I think, when they think about, what's happening with their pound in their pocket, they think about the difference between there and kind of some period over here. And when you look at that difference, OK, so if we look, the difference between here and here, that's 20%. OK, so prices up by 20%. We're all still adjusting to that with this cost of living crisis. Wages are up as well, about kind of 10%, but still, that is a really big, jarring change. The other proviso, OK, is that inflation number, 2.3%, it wasn't quite as low as a lot of people expected. With the upshot that OK, so the other thing I think the Prime Minister was hoping for, you have inflation down, you have the economy doing better, but also maybe you have the Bank of England cutting interest rates, OK? So before this decision, before the inflation numbers came in, there was, according to the markets, an over 50% chance of a June interest rate cut. In other words, the Prime Minister could go into a July election with the bank already cutting interest rates. Then those numbers came out, a bit higher than expected. And look at this line. So the higher that is, the higher the probability of a June cut. Look at what happened to the line. Wow. It went down to under 12%, the chance of a June cut. In other words, it is very unlikely for there to be a Bank of England interest rate cut before this election. That's quite consequential, isn't it? But even so, the big picture for the economy is we are doing so much better than we were not that long ago. There was a recession, those bars going down, that's GDP growth. Two successive quarters of contraction, that's a recession. But now look, we're up to 0.6%, as the Prime Minister was saying earlier. That's one of the fastest growth rates we can see in the G7. You've also got this bigger question, OK? This is looking at household disposable income. And, it's that question, isn't it, Sophie? Do you feel better off now than you were at the start of this Parliament? And actually, for every Parliament going back to the 1950s, the answer to that question actually was yes. In terms of household disposable income, people got better off. So better off in the 1950s, better off in the 60s, better off in this period here, better off under Tony Blair as well, and slightly better off, at least, under the previous terms. But have a look at where this bar is for this latest Parliament. I'll have to squat down to show you. That is the bar for this Parliament we're in right now. So real household disposable income, according to the projections we've got from the OBR, is going to fall for the first time, the only time we've ever seen that in any Parliament going back to the 1950s. That looks pretty kind of difficult for Rishi Sunak to deal with. And then I think, final point really, you've got the fiscal question. We're going to get so much on this, on what's happening to taxes, on what the government's plans are with taxes, on what Labour's plans might be with taxes. But the overall picture for the tax burden, so how much we're paying, taxes as a percent of GDP, is that they have gone up over the course of this Parliament, up to the highest level since 1949. The government will say that's largely down to the pandemic and to what's happened with energy prices. But even so, that is very high. They have been a tax-raising government, even though they might not like that fact. And it's projected to go higher still. The question, of course, is what happens next? What happens with the